This is our postnatal special nutrition and wellness segment. I'm talking to Georgia Marrion, and Georgia is our in-house nutritionist who designed all the meal plans, recipes and shopping lists in my signature pregnancy program called the Ultimate Pregnant Core. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the postpartum period, which, you know, it's always good to set yourself up well in pregnancy. And today we're going to talk about what is the postpartum period, beyond the 6 weeks, so the first 6 weeks and beyond it, and then postnatal depletion, a little bit about that and what actually causes it. So welcome, Georgia.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's just kick off. First of all, what defines postpartum?
Yeah, so I think this is important to define, because the postpartum period, and probably what a lot of women think of as the postpartum period, is the first 6 weeks after giving birth. And this is where, you know, your reproductive organs are starting to go back to their normal state. You know, so uterus is going from about 1,000 grams to 50 grams. Your vaginal and pelvic tissue are starting to regain some sort of tone. And you're also, the 6 weeks, you're getting things like vaginal bleeding and breast changes, whether you're breastfeeding or not, disruption to sleep rhythm and regularity, and also emotional fluctuations. But the postnatal period, I know you talk a lot with your clients about this, extends beyond this first 6 weeks. So as you say a lot, you're postnatal forever. It's just it's different stages of postnatal, and then what women can experience in terms of their health can tend to differ a little bit at those stages.
I know, and it is really confusing for women, because you sort of have this timeline that I'm going to see the doctor at 6 weeks and I'm done, I'm out of the postpartum period. But it takes like 40 days for most women's, even their uterus, to actually just to start reducing in size, let alone the bleeding and the hormones and all the other factors that go along there. So, you know, from a fitness perspective, throwing exercise in the mix on top of that, it's not sort of a green light at 6 weeks to just kind of go and do anything. You've still got a lot of recovery. And as you say, you know, beyond that 6 weeks, you're still postnatal forever. And that doesn't mean, you know, you can't do anything. It just means to bring some awareness to what is going on in your body. So I agree.
It's all about awareness. It's not about putting the brakes on that you have to give up anything that you did prior to pregnancy in terms of exercise. But I just think it's a matter of the more that you're aware of these things that are impacting on where you are postnatally, well, then you can address those potential imbalances, and that's just going to help you more in the long term in terms of many years postpartum. So that's what this is really all about.
Yeah, completely. Because I mean, so many factors come into it, everyone, and you can't really compare yourself to anyone else. You have a different birth, you know, different size baby, all of that. So beyond the 6 weeks, there's still a lot of factors. So talk about sort of where often you see postnatal depletion and what that is.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because when we're talking postnatal beyond the first 6 weeks, and quite rightly, there is a lot of focus on that first 6 weeks because it's a particularly intense time, right? But what's not often considered, and this needs to be considered when we're talking about postnatal depletion, is the impact of carrying a baby for 8 to 9 months, the impact of giving birth, whether it was natural or C-section, and if you had any complications, the impact of those. And then after you've had the baby, the impact of balancing looking after a baby or babies with other things that you have in your life, because everything doesn't stop. So partners, it can do for the first 6 weeks, but beyond that, things women are often expected to go back to so-called normal, and then wondering why they're not handling it. So, you know, partners and work and friends and extended family, and if you have other children, and the long-term impact of all of these on women's health. And that's really what postnatal depletion is about. Is unfortunately it has become somewhat normalized that once you become a mum and once you start getting older, symptoms like fatigue, poor immune health, hormone imbalances, gut issues, and difficulty handling elevated stress are just a normal part of that, rather than what they are, which is a sign that something is out of balance somewhere. And this is where
exhaustion, like I think as
Absolutely.
women, we just push through it, and it's like, oh, I'm meant to be exhausted. I've just had a baby. I'm a mum. I'm meant
having
to
a
be
baby.
depleted, as you say, exhausted. But you know, when you
and
think
that's
about
where the term postnatal depletion has come about in recent years, which is great, because essentially we're talking about the physical and mental impact and deterioration that women experience from giving birth, breastfeeding, and balancing motherhood with modern living. So unlike the perception or expectation, if you like, of women and society in general, it's not just the first 6 months or so having a baby that women can feel its impact. It can last for years and years and years, decades. And if you have multiple children and close together, you can see how this can impact for women many years after.
Yeah, it's like a cumulative effect, isn't it? And the same goes from, you know, not only mentally and depleted, but even like a physical injury. If you've got issues down there postpartum, you know, with your pelvic floor, and you sort of think, oh, I'm just going to push through that. That happens to everyone if they have a baby. And then you have another baby on top of that. And it just is this cumulative effect. And as you say, that the awareness is the first big step, the awareness.
Absolutely.
So what is happening from a hormonal, let's first of all talk about the hormonal point of view, and then how you can possibly support yourself, particularly through nutrition, as you come through this.
Okay. So I think we need to clarify what we're talking about. Like, what does it look like when we're talking about postnatal depletion, which hormonal is part of it, obviously. You've just had a baby, or you had baby however many months or years ago, and depending on what your hormonal health was like before that. Commonly, you're looking at things like estrogen and progesterone imbalances. So since we're talking about the first, say, 6 weeks and beyond, what is common is that, after birth, there tends to be a fairly significant drop in your progesterone, just by nature of that you've had the baby, and estrogen and progesterone tend to work like this with each other when they're in balance. So it's a relative decrease in progesterone, which means the effects of estrogen can be more pronounced. And there often is also imbalances in thyroid and adrenal as well, because they work as a triad. So that's a common presentation. Physically, it tends to present, this is where we're talking about postnatal depletion, poor immune health, which when we're talking about that, we mean increased frequency and or severity of infections. Gut health tends to be quite significantly affected. The whole fatigue, exhaustion, tired when you wake up, or wide but tired type of thing.
Wide but tired is a big one.
Yeah,
so is that part of
Yeah.
elevated cortisol levels too?
It can be. It depends on where you're at when you're talking about adrenal health. It depends on, because when someone's adrenal glands may not be functioning very well, and it tends to happen over a long period of time, it can initially cortisol can be relatively high, but then it can go down. So it depends on where you're at that stage with your cortisol, and how that's impacting on your thyroid, and therefore how it's coming about. So other physical things you're talking about with postnatal depletion are things like loss of libido, brain fog, and poor sleep. And then you add in the mental emotional side. So that can look like things like reduced capacity to handle elevated stress, crying for so-called no reason, but there is a reason, but you think there's no reason for it.
Completely. And I think women are just like, oh, all brushed off. It's just PMS, or you're just hormonal, or you're
or I'm not doing it right, and that's where,
or I'm not doing it right.
I'm not doing it right. As women and mums, we immediately go, it must be something I'm doing wrong. And that's where the not feeling good enough as a mother is a really common, along with, like, it's not just one thing, postnatal depression, and that's a separate thing, but they can often coexist, and there can be crossover in the types of symptoms that are occurring. And the whole frustration, overwhelm, not coping. So it tends to be a bit of a combination. As you said at the beginning, it will present different for every woman in terms of what might present more predominantly, but it tends to be a combination of your physical, hormonal, and mental, emotional kind of things that are presenting. And that's where you'd be looking at, okay, I think postnatal depletion might be worth looking at here. So
yeah, I know for me, one of the biggest things was, I just try and describe it after third baby, was I just felt like you know, the fuse was really short. So, you know,
Yeah,
I'm burning down, I'm running off this much. And then it was like one little thing to trigger me, and I'd just be, you know, emotional or tired or exhausted or really angry for no reason.
yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, and you do, like, I was like, oh, well, this is just the way it is. I've had 3 children. You know, I've had 4 hours sleep. And but then I think, yeah, it's this cumulative effect. And as you say, it all becomes the physical, the mental, the emotional, hormonal. It's all linked.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's when you look at the causes of it, and it's, you know, fairly complex, because we're not just talking about one thing. But a good analogy I've seen is where, if you imagine yourself as a bucket of water, and each stressor, like all these things that can contribute or cause it, is a hole in the bucket. So if you just have one hole, well, then you can usually fix that and it all as well. But then it's often lots of little holes, and the water comes out, and they're coming quicker than what you can fix. And that's where postnatal depletion can come about. And remember, when we're talking about stress on the body, it's both physical and psychological, and the impact is the same on the bodies. This is why postnatal depletion can often occur for many years after women have had kids, not just the first 6 to 12 months. So when we're talking about causes, you know, obviously, again, back to the physical thing, we need to think about what a woman's health status was before birth. You know, many women are already functioning at or close to their maximum capacity of what their body can or should be able to handle, you know, the busyness sort of syndrome. And then you add pregnancy in and labor in, and the physical toll of breastfeeding, and they're all have significant nutrient and energy demands on your body's resources, you know. So that's when you've just had the baby, and that's all of that. And then you add in sleep deprivation, and depending again what your sleep was like before you had kids and then after having kids, that's a stressor as well. And then another cause can be your nutrient levels, right? So this is a big one, and we need to clarify there's nutrient insufficiency and there's nutrient deficiency, and they're different things. So nutrient insufficiency is essentially where levels of vitamins or minerals or nutrients not in the area where they can immediately cause some sort of disease state or pathology, but it means that your cells aren't getting a particular nutrient or nutrients enough to be able to function as well as they can be, versus depletion, which is where you are at a particular level of a certain nutrient, that it can cause it in a disease state. And often there can be a combination of the two. Like you might have 1 or 2 nutrients that are depleted to a point where it can contribute to a disease or a pathology, but other ones are just at the suboptimal kind of level. And it can be tricky as well with knowing which ones to test for. So nutrient levels, and both of these can contribute to postnatal depletion. And that's problem. Obviously, everyone is different with particular nutrients, but common ones you see with women postpartum are things like iodine, iron is a big one for women in general, B12, folic acid, your zinc, selenium, and your fatty acids, your omega-3 fatty acids. And this can be exacerbated if you're having, say, multiple births, say twins, or if you're having your children close together. If you can imagine, if you fall pregnant and your levels of certain nutrients were below optimal levels, and then as a natural part of pregnancy and labor, that goes further down. You know, you can see how that can come about. So I guess that's, and then you think about things like inflammation and environmental toxins, which is a whole other topic, and stress factors, and they're just your physical things. You can imagine there's
well, back on the physical, like a lot of my clients have the Apple Watch, and I don't know, for those that have an Apple Watch, when you look at it, there's this little red circle that goes around, and this is just the physical incidental movement that they've been during the day, not exercise. And I always say to them, you know, sometimes I see them, you know, 8:30, 6 in the morning, and they've been up all night, and this thing has gone around a few times already. So yes, you've been physically moving, but on top of that, as you say, there's stresses that happen with that. You're trying to sleep, you're on high alert with a baby crying. And then, as you say, these little holes start coming in the bucket, causing the postnatal depletion. So I always say, you know, if you're already depleted from whatever the night you've had or the week you've had, or it could have been the year you've had, let's not go and do a depleting workout on top of that. Okay, let's take that into consideration, because what you've been doing does count. Like, don't ever think that's just the way it is as a mother, because it just adds another hole in the bucket.
That's right. And it's not a matter of that you'll never be able to do that again. It's just a matter of, well, let's look at the areas where you're out of balance that are not helping you to be able to do those things, and let's look at support those gradually, so you can gradually get to a point of that. So, you know, another area which is a big one, I think, which is underestimated, is the mental emotional sort of causes, which
completely.
is society and our own expectations of how motherhood should be done. You know, we have high standards for ourselves. We should be self-sufficient. We should be able to do it all. The impact of having difficulty conceiving in the first place, and that can have significant impacts postnatally in terms of, again, the expectations we have in ourselves, the self-doubt, the competitiveness of motherhood, isolation, and then postnatal depression. So they're all emotional. So you can imagine taking all these into account, the mental and emotional, the physical side, like you touched on, and then the nutrient side. You can really see why this is really common. You know, because there would be not many women postnatal that would have all of these up to the level that would be really supporting their health.
Completely. It's really common, but I think it's also, it's so common, it's almost become normal.
Well, it's normalized.
It's like it's normalized, and it's like, well, it's okay to say I'm not 100%. I'm not okay. Like,
because in a lot of times, like, women automatically think that it's something that they're doing or not doing in terms of, I'm not a good enough mother. But if you're, say, for example, iron levels are so below that you're heading into anemia, you know, that's a significant physical impact in terms of how you can actually get through your day. You know, and a lot of these can be, not to say you're going to immediately feel like, you know, you're having 12 hours sleep a night and, you know, you're living this so-called perfect life in terms of your physical health, but there are a lot of things that can be done for women that can bring you back up to a level where you're not feeling completely depleted and completely exhausted. So that's kind of the point of this, is
it's
raising that awareness of that.
And just because you can't see it, like, you might feel it, it's almost like saying, you know, if you had a sprained ankle, would you just keep running on that? Keep going for a walk and a run every day on that sprained ankle? No, because it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So, you know, as you say, that I know you always talk about it, it always starts as a whisper, and then it becomes,
that's it.
The body wisdom.
That's it. And it's, okay, again, it's tuning into that to see where you feel like,
shout.
That's it. And it'll be different for every woman, what might be, I guess, the main sort of drive for them. Whether it's, for some women, it's very much the emotional, mental side that's really, really out of balance, and that's really driving, and then that impacts on your physical. For other women, it's the other way around. It's very much the physical side, whether it's how much physical activity they're doing or what their nutrient status is, and then that over a period of time can impact on your mental emotional health. So you can see how there can be one that might be the main thing for you, but then over a period of time, if it's not addressed, can then impact all of it. So and that's where all the different types of symptoms and signs can present.
So on that, let's just find out what are some of the solutions you recommend, you know?
I mean, I always think it always comes down to looking at the why for a particular person, because as we've sort of touched on, and anyone listening would appreciate, this is going to present differently for everyone in terms of what's driving it, and therefore how you're presenting with it. So I think the key is really to look at, what is that for you? So physically, looking at what your hormonal status is, looking at your nutrient status, looking if there's any food allergies or intolerances that might be contributing, looking at your environmental toxins and inflammation, all that sort of stuff. And addressing any relevant imbalances, because that can quite often, say, if we're using nutritional status as an example, if you're low in particular nutrients like we spoke about, or deficient like iron and iodine, and some of the other micronutrients, and you address those, that can have an impact on, say, your energy levels and your ability to handle stress and that sort of thing. So so looking at that sort of stuff, nourishing your body with good nutrition, you know, thinking of it as building blocks, not in terms of good food and bad food, but looking at food that makes your body feel good, you know, and doesn't take away the nutrients that your body doesn't really have the energy at the moment.
So important. Like, I think for women as well, that this pressure postpartum as well to lose the baby weight.
Yes.
And looking at food in this way that oh, I shouldn't eat that because, you know, I'm trying to lose. As females, we're just so programmed. And I always like to say to a lot of my clients, well, just eat it. And how do you feel after you eat it? Do you feel more energized? Do you feel like, oh, wow, I really needed that? Or do you feel like you've eaten crappy food, so you feel crappy? So rather than looking at food as, you know, good food or a bad food or I should or I shouldn't, it's like, you know, how is
a particular food or particular way of eating, is that working for you? Say, like, for example, it's quite common for a lot of women once they've had their baby to suddenly go really low carb. You know,
low carb and a lot of which, you know, if that works for you, awesome. And a lot of intermittent fasting I see. And yes, if that works for you, awesome. But I also think you need to, you're not living, a lot of these, you know, diets or whatever are made for people who work a 9-to-5 job and have 8 to 10 hours sleep. So I think you need to take a lot of other factors into consideration.
Absolutely. And I think definitely intermittent fasting can have a place for some people, and lower carb can have a place for some people. But you need to say, if you decide to go low carb, but then you're really low on energy levels and you're irritable and that sort of thing, that's where you'd be kind of going, okay, well, maybe tuning into, is that actually working for you? Is it making you feel good? Or are you someone that, okay, that's just not working for me? You know, so that's what I mean by tuning into how you're eating overall, and how foods, rather than making good food and bad food, how is this food making me feel? Is this helping does this make my body feel good, or does it make me feel rubbish? And just sort of tuning into that, and then sort of modifying your way of eating. So for the most part, you're eating food that makes you feel good, rather than judging yourself for, oh my God, I've had that and that's a bad thing. Because then you're adding a whole emotional thing onto
the whole
your
conversation.
It's causing more stress.
Yeah, the internal conversation. I know. I see it a lot. And I mean, I've been there too. Like, I'm so programmed in the fitness industry and doing fitness comps, and, you know, you should only eat this and you can only eat that, and that's a low carb day, high carb day, and all of that. And this brain explosion. But I often like to say, and even now, like, I think for women as well, it's like, just take 2 steps back. And, you know, a baby will stop breastfeeding when they're full. A baby will tell you when they're hungry, you know, when you start feeding them solids, or they're like pets, my children. Like, as soon as 5, 6 o'clock hits, they come into the kitchen looking for dinner, because they're tuned into that body wisdom and that intuitive eating. And we lose that because of all this internal dialogue that we have.
And they're very clear about food that makes them feel good and food that doesn't. But somewhere along the way, we lose that as adults. Completely. And I think, and, you know, looking at nourishing your food, if you think of food like building blocks, and there are certain building blocks that are going to really help build your body up, particularly in the first 6 to 12 months after postpartum. And there are those that, if you're eating them most of the time, you know, they're going to break your body down to a degree, you know, in terms of how well your cells are functioning, your tissues, and therefore your organs are functioning. So, you know, we're talking about what you're doing most of the time here. So, I'm not talking about perfectionism.
No, the perfectionism.
So other solutions is obviously, and this is a big one, I know, but sleep, taking steps to improve your sleep and prioritize sleep. Like, and I understand 100% how this happens, but if you're someone that at the end of the day might sit on your phone for an hour and a half, you know, before you go to bed, rather than going to sleep, if you know your baby's going to be up, you know, prioritizing that at the moment, because sleep is really important.
So important. And I think there's just so many distractions, and, you know, all the EMFs and white, you know, the bright light, which just makes it so hard to switch off. Finding
another way to switch off, and that's where your mental emotional kind of solutions come in, like being gentle and kind with yourself, like mentally and emotionally and physically, like we've been speaking about. Where can you get more support in your life? Is there somewhere you can get some more support, rather than feeling like you've got to do it on your own? Are you letting people support you, or are you just feeling like you need to be Wonder Woman and doing it all on your own all the time? And, you know, stress management strategies that work for you. You know, meditation, even if it's 2 or 3 minutes a day, is that something? You know, moving, is that your thing? Like, where you get out and go for a walk in a way that, as you say, that's appropriate for where you're at postnatally. Time to yourself. What is the, for you, if you had to pick one thing for stress management in the first 6-12 months, what is it that you feel like you're really missing that would really help with your overall well-being?
Could even just be, you know, having a half-hour shower on your own. without worrying
Exactly.
and having one ear open thinking the baby's going to cry or what are the kids up to.
Sitting down having a cup of tea all at the same time without having to warm it up, like that can be amazing. It doesn't have to be anything big. It's very simple things sometimes.
Which just
relationships.
allow you,
Are your relationships supportive in your life, whether it's your immediate partner or whether it's in your wider circle, like your mother's group, your part or whatever? Are they supportive people or are they really not? So and finding those people that are supportive. And regular
those boundaries, I think, are really important, because it's a way of saying, yes, I need help, but the way you're helping me is not helping, you know? Like really, people. You know, it's okay to set those boundaries and you know, say what you need. It's a conversation and it's awareness and
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so that, I guess that's probably in a nutshell, that's probably the overview for the first 6-12 months, because you can talk about any of these things for hours and hours and hours. But I think encapsulating, I guess, the main message that you'd be wanting to say to a woman that might be feeling like she might have this is, first of all, you know, having a look at where you are and tuning into how you're actually feeling. Do you feel like you're coping or do you feel like you're not, you know, in terms of physically, mentally, emotionally? And if you feel like you're not, seeking out the right help, visiting your GP. If it's postnatal depression, you think, and just to clarify, because obviously this is a really serious condition, I wanted to touch on the difference between postnatal depletion and depression, because a lot of the symptoms can tend to overlap, but the difference would be a woman who has postnatal depression would also be experiencing symptoms where something that would normally have given her joy prior to having a baby no longer does, as well as a lot of the physical types of symptoms we've spoken about. So, and if that is something you're experiencing, even in a mild kind of way, 100% visiting your GP as a starting point to address that. So that's the first thing that I say. Don't just push it down, whether it's depression or whether it's this postnatal depletion we're talking about. Seeking help with someone you feel like you trust as a starting point to look at, okay, well, am I out of balance somewhere? And don't wait for it to get really bad, like where you're exhausted, you cannot get up in the morning, or emotionally you're an absolute mess. You know, that's the thing I would say. If you take anything out of this, tuning into, okay, does any of this resonate with me, and what can I do to get a bit more
little whispers, like if that
listen while your body's whispering, and don't wait for it to yell.
The yelling, and and there's you know, no one is perfect, like no one, and you're not expected to be, and there's just, you know, it's you can't even fathom what it's like when you become a mother. Yes, it's amazing and whatever, but there's so many factors going on. And as you say, like, we'll go back to where we started, it does not stop at 6 weeks postpartum. And you know, as you progress postnatally, whether that be 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years later, if there's more holes going into that bucket, it's just, you know, and then before you know it, you've hit menopause, and there's another cumulative effect on top of that. So, I mean, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but you've just got to bring that, you know, helicopter big picture view into it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think that's probably what we'll touch on next time that we talk about this is, okay, you've got through the first 12 months, you know, and you feel like, okay, we made it through, and then life can feel like it should return back to normal, because often women will go back to work at that point and that sort of thing. But then this type of thing can present, or, you know, it can present in different ways, or certain things will become more prevalent, you know, like your hormone imbalance and your gut tends to be something that beyond the first 12 months you really, I see a lot of in clinics, where that's sort of then contributing how that presents. So so we'll talk about that next time. But yeah, 100%. I think this is something, I hope someone gets something out of it in terms of, even it's awareness that if they're feeling any of these things, it's something that can often be addressed quite
So Georgia, on that note, where if people are interested in chatting to you further from a nutrition or supplementation point of view, or where can people find you?
They can go onto my website, so georgiamarrion.com.au, and there's a way to contact me through that way. So you can just email me, and if you just have questions, just email me a question. So
great, and I'll link all that through as well, so you can find Georgia easily.
Great, awesome. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you so much. That was excellent, and we look forward to part 2.
Wonderful. Talk to you then.